What's that? A short George Saunders short story? It can't be, yet it is. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Aaron Fortin. We are here for another short story discussion video, which will appear in 3 different playlists on the channel. Number 1, the George Saunders playlist. Number 2, the 10th of December short story by short story read along. And number 3, obviously, the short story discussion playlist. Now, this video will have 3 parts: a So What Happened, a Lit Crit, and a Writer's Corner section for the 1.25 page short story from George Saunders known as Sticks. So, what happened? Well, we get a recounting from a child, a grown child, but a child of a father and a mother. The father and the mother both factor into the short story, but really the short story is about the father who is maybe abusive, maybe mean, certainly overbearing, and the one thing that he does is he doesn't dress up, he decorates for holidays. When it's Christmas, he has Santa in the front yard on a pair of sticks that he has aligned like a crucifix. When it's football season, he has a football jersey and a helmet on those same sticks, etc., etc. And on Halloween, it's a ghost. This seems to be the father figure's way to really sort of celebrate with the kids, for the kids, as a kid. Who really knows? But as the story goes on, as the children get older, as mom dies, dad gets more and more eccentric with this crucifix in the front yard. This crucifix in the front yard that is decorated like whatever holiday it is ends up being really esoteric at times, and no one thinks to check in on the old man. No one really ever stops him and says, "Hey, Dad, what's all this kerfuffle about?" They just let him go. Now, at the end, Mom does die, and he celebrates Mom on the crucifix. And then Dad dies. And the kids sell the house, and the next owners of the house, threw the poles in the trash, threw those sticks in the garbage, and left them on the side of the road. So we have here some metaphor to get into. Well, Dad is very overbearing. Dad even wants to monitor how much ketchup you are using at dinner. But he does want to celebrate things. And when the kids move out and they're not there to celebrate those things with Dad, we get this. Dad began dressing the pole with more complexity and less discernible logic. He draped some kind of fur over it on Groundhog Day and lugged out a floodlight to ensure a shadow. When an earthquake struck Chile, he laid the pole on its side and spray painted a rift in the earth. Mom died and he dressed the pole as death and hung from the crossbar photos of Mom as a baby. We'd stop by and find odd talismans from his youth arranged around the base: army medals, theater tickets, old sweatshirts, tubes of Mom's makeup. Obviously, the sticks are a metaphor for Dad. Dad cannot be happy-go-lucky. Dad cannot be the thing, but he can project on the sticks. It is not a coincidence that the sticks are set up like a crucifix. This is to communicate that Dad has sacrificed his life to have his kids. He has sacrificed whatever it was that used to be Dad, probably something creative, because he does still like to have this creative outlet. He has sacrificed that thing and is being Dad instead of that thing. Still, he needs to have an outlet, so he sets up this crucifix this symbol of sacrifice in the front yard, and he decorates that as whatever the prevailing holiday is. Then we get this immediately after this. One autumn he painted the pole bright yellow. He covered it with cotton swabs that winter for warmth and provided offspring by hammering in 6 crossed sticks around the yard. He spray painted it yellow. Now we learn that he is an army man. He is a military guy, a military man, army guy, whatever pairing of words you want to use, because he has army medals. In army terms, what does in that type of language, what does it mean to be yellow? It means to be a coward. Is this dad communicating that he feels he has been a coward? He spray painted it yellow and then gave it children. He turned cowardly and then had his kids. He ran lengths of string between the pole and the sticks, taped to the string letters of apology, admission of error, pleas for the strings, pleas for, where am I at? I'm sorry, pleas for understanding, all written in frantic handwriting on index cards. He is stringing to his children. I am sorry. Please forgive me. I did not mean to screw everything up. I did not mean to be what I am. I did not mean for everything in me to be what it is. Frantic handwriting is also a very important detail. Frantic handwriting. Dad knows he's dying. Dad knows he doesn't have much time left. That frantic handwriting is to communicate with his children. Look, I screwed up. I ruined everything. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. But that's what it was. That's what it is. That is what happened. He painted a sign saying love and hung it from the pole, and another that said forgive. And then he died in the hall with the radio on. And we sold the house to a young couple who yanked out the pole and left it by the roadside on garbage day. Woof. Right? What a punch in the gut. I think that this is prevalent in today's world. There are study after study, there is study after study after study after study about people waiting later and later in life to have kids. And we get a little bit of why, if I can find it here. When our speaker is saying that he went out and found his own woman and started having children, he said that he and she recognized the meanness in themselves. Oh man, where is it? When we left home and had children of our own, found the seeds of meanness blooming also within us. A lot of people are afraid of becoming their parents. A lot of people don't believe in the world as it is. A lot of people don't want to bring someone else into a world that they find so disgusting, so rough, so troubled, so troubling. How could I raise a child to be in this world? A lot of people feel that way. A lot of people feel that way because of what they feel about themselves. That happens to be where everyone in our story finds themselves. And dad is begging forgiveness at the end. He does not get it. Do you get the sense of forgiveness from our speaker here? I do not. What a world we live in, that some of the main fears we have are that we wouldn't be good parents. Previous generations, it seemed to be something that was just accepted. You were going to, if you were going to have a good life, you were going to have children. That was part of what it meant to live your life. You would have your job, you would have your home, you would have your children. It is wild that in today's world, many people don't. So I said that wrong even. You would have your career, you would have your home, you would have your children. I know very few people that have careers. I know a lot of people that have a job or two. It's not the same thing as a career. I know very few people that own a home. Very few people that own a home. They don't have a home. They have someplace they live. They do not own a house. I know very few people eager to have children. I know quite a few people who've had children. Not a whole lot of that I know was planned. No, I'm not saying that most people are disappointed by having children, but I'm saying it does not seem none of what it was to have a life is currently listed in what it means to be alive. You don't have a career, you've got a job. You don't have a home, you don't have a house, you've got someplace you sleep. And you don't have a plan to have children. This short story is written by George Saunders. George Saunders, I believe, is of the baby boomer generation. I might be wrong. I don't know his age exactly. I don't know the exact parameters for what it means to be a boomer. I think he is of that generation. The so the irony is, even right to the millennials, this world that is being hearkened for in this short story does not exist. It is almost a story out of time. Speaking of the story, let's move to the writer's corner section of this video. This feels very much like a Chuck Palahniuk short story. This feels very much like this would probably be a Chuck Palahniuk novel. Chuck Palahniuk, some of his novels are surprisingly thin as far as the actual content is concerned. Maybe Fight Club is among them. I think if you are willing to look at it in a pessimistic fashion, if you were willing to look at it as a critic, you might concede that Fight Club is thin. It's one of my favorite books, but I could understand the take if you were to say that. And so I think that if Chuck Palahniuk had this idea, he would have turned it into an entire novel as opposed to a short story. That said, one of the things that George Saunders is able to do, and is a very, very successful way of being a writer, is he can write things which sort of remind you of something else, but man, this is all George Saunders. The first story in this collection, Victory Lap, I talked a little bit in that video about how it reminds me of Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been by Joyce Carol Oates. But George Saunders could not have written Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been? And Joyce Carol Oates certainly could not have written Victory Lap. Chuck Palahniuk, I don't think, would have had the restraint to write Styx, but I don't think that George Saunders could write Fight Club or Haunted or Choke. The other novels, I think maybe a trained monkey could write, because there's a very large disparity in a lot of Chuck's work, if you ask me. But this does feel... One of the things... The reason I say that is a very effective strategy as a writer is the same reason that people say nothing is new under the sun, is the same reason that people say there are only 5 types of stories that you can write, are the same people that say that, the same reason that people say there's nothing original. If you can be inspired by another writer, and I'm not saying that this was inspired by Chuck Palahniuk, I'm not saying that Victory Lap was inspired by Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been? They certainly feel like it. If you can take those and write a story still that is indelibly you, it is because you have voice. And voice is one of the things that is maybe not all that important to a story, but it's very important to your reader. It is one of the ways that a reader will be utterly infatuated with your work is your voice. So that's one thing to keep in mind there. Also, the last thing that I have to talk about with this very short story from George Saunders is form. This, in my opinion, is a poem. It's not a short story. This is a poem. One of the critiques that I would often levy against writers in writer circles that I ran or in the master's program I had is to say, hey, there's a poem in here somewhere. Or if they had written a poem, I would say, hey, there's a short story in here somewhere, if it felt more like a poem or a short story than the form in which we got it. This feels like a poem as opposed to a short story. There is, however, in my opinion, there is a stigma on poetry. In my opinion, it is difficult to be taken seriously as a poet, much different than as a short story writer or a novelist. Maybe that's not a fair way of saying it, but I think it's the truth. I think that a lot of poets are, even today, seen as la-ti-da or hoity-toity. And though George Saunders writes la-ti-da type stories, at least aesthetically, I don't think that he would. I don't think there's a lot of writers willing to take the risk to be a poet. So there's the Tracy K. Smiths of the world right now. There's the Richard Sykins of the world right now, who are bringing you poetry which is not, which is poetry. I'll say it that way. Poetry which is poetry. But I think that there is a if George Saunders were to start submitting poetry, I think that his name would lose some of the luster for some of the publishers who are the big guys in the room, if that makes any sense. I think that it is an unfortunate truth of the world, maybe especially the world of publishing today, that people are sort of pigeonholed in to where they are. You can't move out, you can't branch out, you can't become, this is what you are. So I doubt we will ever see, obviously I don't think we'll ever see poetry from George Saunders. Obviously we saw a novel from George Saunders, but that has always been the natural progression for short story writers. You go from short stories to the novel because it's a natural progression of things. I don't think we're ever going to see poetry from George Saunders, but I think that this is a poem as opposed to a short story. That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, there is poetry on the channel every Monday. And be sure you hit the subscribe button because, as always, I would love to have you back for the next one.